Okay, so continuing with the books about aviation in general, and I've already mentioned how flying and aircraft was my main hobby growing up. And, I built airfix kits, did all that kind of thing. And it was when I was about 11 years of age when we had a family holiday to Ireland. And this started with a flight from Speke Airport across to Dublin by Aer Lingus. Now, to me, this was the best part of the holiday, and all my anticipation was on this. So we arrive at the airport, and back then there was no security or anything like that. It was a lot more, a lot less formalities to go through. Um, and then I saw our aircraft, and we walked out to it, and it was a Fokker Friendship F-27 high wing turboprop, and I can still remember the smell of the Avter, the fuel they used, which is now the common smell at airports. But back then, the jet age had only really started, and we boarded the aircraft, and we it was interesting because some of the seats faced to the rear. My seat was I was in the first row, and it was rear facing. I had great view out the window because it was a high wing, and my mother asked the flight attendant if I could go into the cockpit, and she arranged it. And I went up front, and I was chatting to the two pilots, and they obviously realised how keen I was on aircraft. I didn't know anything about the Fokker Friendship, but they asked me what engines they thought it had, and I just took a guess, and I said Rolls Royce, and they were Dart. Um, and that was great. And then while we were in Ireland, we toured all around, and we went to Shannon Airport and saw some of the aircraft there, the big transatlantic jets, and then did a little bit more viewing at Dublin, and then we flew back in another Friendship, and that was great, and it really kicked off my love of that particular aircraft, and of the airport, Speke Airport. And I wrote to Aer Lingus, and they sent me loads of brochures, really a lot of material. That they used to do, Aer Lingus used to do a thing called the Blessing of the Fleet, and they get a priest out, and each aircraft had a name. The one I flew on was Finton, which was a saint, and they were blessed, and I thought that was really great. And there was a book with all that in. So that really geared my interest up, and I started going down to the airport, which was still then called Speke Airport, every Sunday. Uh, and I'd get the bus down, two buses, and I'd spend all afternoon in Speke Airport, which, to be quite honest, was not a plane spotter's paradise because it's a bit of a backwater aviation wise, and there wasn't that much going on. Uh, Starways were there, and they had some regular flights and also charter flights. So you sometimes see the DC-3s, the Dakotas, and sometimes the DC-4s, the Skymasters. Occasionally, you'd see a British Airways or British European Airways Viscount land for some reason, or from some of the other airlines, and also Bristol freighters, which were a big bulbous aircraft that the nose opened and it would take cars, and they were a regular feature there. But for me, the highlight was the Aer Lingus flight, and I couldn't wait to see the Friendship. But unfortunately, sometimes it was a little bit late, and it was getting near my tea time, and I had to get off, and sometimes I'd miss it, and sometimes I'd stay and watch it, and then get shouted out at home for missing my tea. And that was it. That's what I used to do, and I'd have my plane spotting books, John W.R. Taylor, and spend the whole afternoon there. And they had a viewing balcony, which was free. You could go up there. There was also pleasure flights that used to go. I never had the money to go on one of them, but I used to lust after them. And yeah, that was it. So the book we're going to talk about is this one, On Liverpool Airport, by Phil Butler, and it's a revision of a book that was written for the 50th anniversary, and then they updated it to, I think, 2004 it was updated to. Very heavily illustrated, including a good section of colour. If I can just find them somewhere. There we are. Some really nice colour pictures, and it goes into history. The first flights and during the First World War, the racecourse at Aintree was used for aviation, and there were quite a few flights there. And then in about 1930, they decided to build an airport dedicated at Speke, and they used buildings called Chapel House Farm originally, and that was the nucleus. And some of the early routes were interesting. Liverpool to Birmingham to Cardiff to Plymouth. In 1934, KLM started regular flights to Amsterdam. And if I remember rightly, the last time I flew from Speke was to Amsterdam. Slacky and I, on our first trip to Georgia, we routed via the dam. But that route doesn't fly anymore. It wasn't KLM either, it was some other airline doing it. But that was one. And then in 1938, they built the terminal, which is rather iconic, and I put a picture of it at the intro. And it was made a proper airport, really. And then, of course, the war came along, and they built what was called a shadow factory, because they dispersed aircraft production over the country in preparation for the war. And the Roots Group, a big industrial group, had a shadow factory at Speke, and they built Blenheims and Halifaxes there. And they also assembled, there was an assembly plant for Lockheed Hudson's came over. And then actually during the war it became RAF Station Speke, and Hamdens were flown from there, and also Hurricanes. They had a fighter squadron there. And they also, very interestingly, built a catapult launcher for the maritime protection Hurricanes, which were called Hurricats. And for training, they put a concrete plinth and built this cat on it. The picture of it in the book. And these were the Hurricanes that were flown off merchant ships for convoy protection, which was an absolutely feat of bravery, because the chance of recovering in the Atlantic back to the ship were very, very slim. There's a picture in the book of some helicopters at Speke, and it links to a book we reviewed in the military aviation section by Captain Eric Brown, which Wings on My Sleeve, where he was sent up to Speke to bring a helicopter back, and he'd never flown one before. So he kind of learnt on the spot. Anybody knows anything about aviation, flying a helicopter is completely different from flying a fixed wing. And it's not something that you can just pick up like that. But he's such an experienced and knowledgeable test pilot and aviator that he managed to do it and fly down to Farnborough, I think it was. In 1966, they built what was called the new runway, which is it was offset, and it kind of almost parallels the river, 7,500 feet. It will take all aircraft, the big transatlantic jets, the 747s can land there, and quite often they have been diverted there. The the big aircraft carrying cargo for aircraft production. The Airbus wings and things like that can land there, and it's an east-west runway. And I remember I flew to Galway from Speak, and you take off east-west, you fly east-west directly, no deviation, and Galway's runway is east-west. So it must be the easiest flight for a pilot to take. A new terminal was started in '86, and then it was upgraded in 2002, and that's the current terminal. Um, the book doesn't cover Speak becoming John Lennon International Airport, which I thought was a really good thing. A lot of airports all over the world are named after people. You know, Chicago is O'Hare, named after Butch O'Hare, who was a fighter ace, and John Wayne Airport out in California. Um, in South Africa, a lot of the airports were named after political figures. Jan Smuts, yeah, he was something of a hero, but the others were usually political non-entities. So John Lennon, yeah, why not? I've got to mention Manchester, because at the height of Speak, Manchester was really not a, a well-functioning airport. It was, on a par with Speak, really small kind of municipal airport. We went there one day for just a day out and had a look around. There was very little there. But Manchester Council, unlike Liverpool, were very go ahead and saw the future of aviation. Liverpool Council, of course, famously the people who demolished the cavern, never saw the marketing potential of the Beatles, and just let Speak just go into financial oblivion, really. One idea that I always thought might have been interesting was to take the big airbase at Burtonwood, which is an American airbase. It's one of the biggest, and use that because it's exactly midway between the two towns. But they didn't do that. So Manchester's become a massive hub, international airport, and for me, it's only a couple of minutes difference to drive from my house in West Derby to Manchester or to Speak. There's very, very little travel difference. And of course, from Manchester, you can connect to loads and loads of places. From Speak, you can't really connect to any major international hubs. It doesn't even have flights to London anymore. Now, another book we'll be talking about is about the Starways airline, which was Liverpool's own airline, which used to fly sometimes 5 flights a day to London. So it's been a real backward step. The old terminal is now a hotel, Crown Plaza, and the runways are no longer used. There was a security company based at Liverpool Airport, and they got a contract to train a European close protection team, and I got brought in to actually do the training for them. And they had a training centre, a pretty good training centre at the airport, but we used the old runways for driver training, doing drills. So that was interesting. And special branch at the airport showed us round and let us observe a royal flight arriving. So that was interesting too. So the book, probably a book I wish I had when I was a kid. I did have a book about British airports, which I bought with my pocket money, which had a section on Speak. But this is the complete story up to 2004. As I say, the pictures are great. Really, really, if you're into aircraft, then you'll love the book, and particularly the history of a particular airport, which by no means is a success story.